Zola Hayes is the only black female student at Northwood Academy. When she decides to attend a party with her friend, the only black male student at the academy, Chad Harrington, and his friends see it as a golden opportunity to assert their dominance over the newcomers. They publicly humiliate Zola, and when that isn't enough, they target her friend, treating him like prey to toy with. What they don't know is that they've pushed Zola to her limit. In martial artist who has trained for a decade, she's about to make them regret it. Before we continue, I would like to know where in the world you are watching this story from. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on inspiring and impactful stories like this one. Zola Hayes had executed her final strike at Sensei Kai's dojo in Phoenix just 3 days prior, her gloved hands connected with the heavy bag in a rhythm that had become as instinctive as breathing. She was 10 years old when she first entered that dojo, now 16. As she navigated the immaculate corridors of Northwood Academy, she carried that same unwavering self-assurance. The suburban private school felt like stepping into a glossy magazine, polished granite floors, awards sparkling under recessed lighting, and students who appeared to have just exited a high-fashion catalogue. Everything was so pristine, so flawless, so profoundly different from the Phoenix public school she'd left when her father's job necessitated their relocation. The academic year was already more than halfway complete. Given her mid-year transfer, Zola checked her phone for her locker combination, acutely aware of being the sole black face in an ocean of affluent, mostly white faces. The stares followed her like searchlights, conversations dwindling to hushed tones as she passed. The commotion began before she had even located her assigned locker. "Come on, Jones, fight back," someone shouted from around the bend. Zola quickened her pace and turned to witness a cluster of students forming a ring near the car lockers, their devices already poised, capturing whatever transpired at the nucleus. Through the spaces between bodies, she caught sight of a slender, black boy with spectacles pinned against the lockers by 3 white boys. Her heart leaped. Another black student. She wasn't entirely alone here after all, but seeing him in such a predicament, cornered and outnumbered, made her stomach clench. Perhaps if you spent less time engrossed in algorithms and more time performing manual labor, you'd adroitly grasp your proper position. One of the aggressors sneered, a bulky blonde with vacant eyes. The assembly chuckled, and some pulled out their phones to record. "Please just leave me alone," the boy pleaded softly, his voice trembling. "What was that, boy? Speak up." A tall, dark-haired figure in a Letterman jacket seized the kid's shirt. "We can't decipher your mumbling." Notebooks and coding manuals strewn across the polished tiles as they shoved him harder. Pages tore under expensive designer sneakers, and Zola saw the title of one advanced quantum computing. This young man possessed an intellect far superior, probably smarter than all of them combined, and they were treating him like refuse. "Hey," she pushed through the circle of students, phones swiving toward her like weapons. "Back away from him." The 3 boys turned, and their faces illuminated with cruel satisfaction. "Oh, look at this," the blonde one said, straightening up. 2 for 1 special today. I'm Chad Harrington, and you've just brightened my entire day." The dark-haired one clapped his hands together. "Christmas arrived early, boys. A new plaything." "Look, MJ," the third boy, shorter but built like a brick wall, said with feigned sweetness. "They sent you a girlfriend. How quaint." "Silence, Bryce," Chad said, never diverting his gaze from Zola. "This demands finesse." Zola stepped between them and MJ, her hands clenched at her sides. "I said back away or what?" Chad circled around her slowly like a predator. "Are you going to file a NUFA grievance? This is Northwood Academy. Sweetheart, we don't entertain complaints from your sort, my sort." Zola's voice dropped to a perilous whisper. You know precisely what I mean. Chad's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the unsightly truth beneath. You people always assume you can just waltz in here and alter traditions. But this institution is our legacy, our domain. The dark-haired boy, whom someone in the crowd called Kyle, nodded eagerly. It's been in our families for generations. The crowd pressed closer, sensing prey in the water. Zola felt their eyes upon her, anticipating if she would falter, if she would flee, if she would provide the spectacle they craved. But she'd been preparing for this her entire life, even if she hadn't consciously known it. Your domain? Zola's stance shifted weight, balanced on the balls of her feet. Amusing. I thought this was a private academy, funded by hefty tuition fees. Bryce stepped closer, his wrestler's build intimidating. Tuition doesn't mean it's open season for everyone, especially not your kind. The word hit the air like a physical blow. Even some of the white students looked uncomfortable now, but nobody moved to intervene. Zola felt the serene focus that always preceded a demanding sparring session. The way her vision sharpened and her breathing steadied. She'd experienced it in the present dojo dozens of times, but never like this. Never when it held such immense significance. Repeat that, she said, quietly. Chad held up his hands abruptly, altering his strategy. Whoa, take it easy. Bryce here gets a little overzealous sometimes. We were merely extending a welcome to Northwood, right? Guys, Kyle and Bryce looked confused by the sudden shift, but followed Chad's lead, stepping back slightly, just a bit of harmless fun. Chad continued his voice now reasonable, almost apologetic. No damage done, come on guys, let's afford our new students some privacy. As they walked away, Chad looked back over his shoulder. See you around, MJ, both of you. This is going to be a very memorable year. The crowd dispersed, and suddenly Zola and MJ were alone in the hallway, surrounded by scattered notebooks and torn pages. Are you all right? Zola asked, kneeling to help gather his belongings. Another black student, MJ said, his voice filled with wonder and relief. I can't fathom it. I truly believed I would graduate as the sole one. Well, you're not alone any longer. The following morning, Zola found MJ at his locker before first period, meticulously organizing his books like they were sacred relics. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his movements were more hesitant than yesterday. Rough night, she asked, leaning against the locker next to his. Couldn't sleep. Keep replaying what Chad said. MJ glanced around nervously about this being a memorable year. Don't let him penetrate your thoughts. That's what intimidators do. They make you apprehensive of phantom dangers. Easy for you to assert. You haven't endured this for 3 years. MJ's voice cracks slightly. Every single day I awaken, contemplating what they'll attempt next. Smear gum in my hair, trip me in the dining hall, trap me in the supply closet. Yesterday was actually mild, compared to certain days. Zola felt indignation rising in her chest. And nobody halts them. The instructors behave as though they're oblivious. Headmaster Thorne dismisses it as typical youthful exuberance. My parents believe I should simply concentrate on my academic performance and disregard everything else. MJ slammed his locker shut. Sometimes I contemplate if it'd been 9. Would be simpler if I just transferred. Don't you dare. You belong here as much as anyone else. Before MJ could respond, Kyle appeared beside them, his dark hair gleaming under the fluorescent light. Well, look who's already becoming fast friends. Chad and Bryce flanked him, but on either side, forming a barrier that obstructed the hallway traffic. Other students maneuvered around them without establishing eye contact, skilled in the art of feigned obliviousness. How was your inaugural night in paradise, Zola? Chad's voice dripped with feigned concern. I trust you located suitable accommodations. I understand housing can be complex for individuals like you, people like me. Transferees, Chad articulated smoothly. New students, it's perpetually challenging to acclimate to a more demanding standard of education. Bryce Gapod, indeed, I'll wager Phoenix. Public schools didn't adequately prepare you for our scholarly benchmarks. I'm performing perfectly fine, thank you. Zola's hands clenched at her sides. Of course you are. I'm confident you'll integrate seamlessly. Kyle's smile was razor sharp. Perhaps you can mentor MJ here in Street Wisdom. Impart some authentic character. What are you implying? MJ's voice was barely audible. Oh, come on, MJ. You're so fastidious, so decorous. Perhaps associating with Zola will aid you in embracing your ancestry. Assimilate some urban culture. Chad held up his phone, its camera aimed at them. Regarding cultural enrichment, I ought to capture this landmark occasion, the genesis of Northwood Academy's inaugural. He paused dramatically. Study. Group. Put that device away, Zola. Commanded. It's a public area. I can record whatever I desire. Chad's finger hovered over the recording button. Utter. Something for posterity. MJ. Perhaps freestyle for us. I don't freestyle, MJ stated quietly. Of course you do. It's inherent in your genetic makeup. Isn't it? Come on, drop some verses about being intelligent and such. Bryce commenced an abysmal beatboxing, attracting more attention from passing students. Yo-yo, check it. Stop, MJ pleaded, his face flushed with mortification. What's amiss? I thought you'd value our interest in your culture, Kyle remarked. Zola stepped forward, her martial arts training rendering her movements fluid and self-assured. His heritage includes a clear path to academic distinction, while you, adults, are repeating junior year. Chad's smile wavered for just a moment. Careful, Zola. You're new here. You don't yet comprehend the social dynamics. I grasped them flawlessly. 3 failures, tormenting someone far more brilliant than all of them combined, because it inflates their self-importance. The hallway had grown quieter, students slowing down to observe the confrontation. Chad noticed the audience, and his smile returned, broader than before. You know what? You're absolutely correct. MJ is incredibly astute. Isn't that right, buddy? Chad clapped MJ on the shoulder, hard enough to make him stumble. Top of the class, bound for an Ivy League, truly an asset to his community. The phrase hung in the air like venom. Several white students nodded approvingly, as if Chad had uttered something rational instead of discriminatory. A stellar paradigm, Kyle added. One of the commendable ones. Zola saw red. Her fist was halfway to Kyle's face before MJ seized her arm. Don't, he whispered, urgently. They're recording. They desire you to strike them. Chad laughed, delightedly. Behold that self-restraint, gentlemen. MJ is already instilling discipline in her. The warning bell rang, and students began moving toward their classrooms. Chad pocketed his phone and straightened his Letterman jacket. We should proceed to class. Wouldn't want to be tardy on our second day, would we? Zola? He walked away backwards, still smiling. See you around. Study partners. As the hallway emptied, Zola and MJ stood in the aftermath, both breathing heavily. That was shrewd, Zola said, finally, preventing me from hitting him. I've deciphered their maneuvers. They utter appalling remarks, then feign victimhood when you react. MJ's hands were trembling as he gathered his books. They film everything, manipulate it to portray us as the aggressors. How do you tolerate it? I tell myself, it's impermanent. One more year and I'm gone. A full scholarship somewhere far removed from this place. MJ's voice was hollow, but now they have you to target too. I'm sorry. Don't offer apologies. I chose to intervene. Why? Zola pondered the query as they walked toward their first class. Because in Phoenix, we safeguard each other. Because you're brilliant and compassionate, and you don't merit this, because no one should and have to confront this alone. For the first time since she'd met him, MJ smiled. It was subtle and fragile, yet genuine. Thanks, he uttered. I had forgotten what it felt like to have Stuart G, someone on my side. As they entered their classroom, Zola caught sight of Chad, Kyle, and Bryce whispering in the back row, their eyes tracing her and MJ's every movement. They were devising something. She could discern it in their expressions. But for the first time in 3 years, MJ wasn't confronting them alone. By late April, Zola and MJ had established a rhythm that felt like both survival and camaraderie merged into one. They convened at his locker every morning, ate lunch together in the digital commons, where Chad's clique couldn't easily corner them, and walked into the parking lot together after school. 3 weeks of collaboration had illuminated for both of them the significance of having mutual support. They superglued my locker shut this morning, MJ lamented, prying at the metal door with a credit card. 4th time this month. Did you report it? To whom? Headmaster Thorne. MJ's laugh was bitter. He informed me last week that perhaps I should contemplate being more congenial if I wish to integrate better. Zola watched him struggle with the lock, anger building in her chest. Your parents are aware of any of this? Some of it. They're not the turn the other cheek types. Trust me, my mother's been meticulously documenting everything, capturing images of the locker, preserving the notes. She intends to submit a formal grievance to the Oversight Committee, but my father believes we should defer until we possess more irrefutable evidence, construct an airtight case. MJ finally managed to open his locker, revealing another crude drawing taped inside. Sometimes I think they forget I have to endure this every single day while they're constructing their legal argument. They walked toward first period, passing the bulletin board that had lighting by there, exploded with spring formal announcements overnight. Glittery posters promised a night of starlight in flowing script adorned with photos of last year's formal court. All white, faces beaming from behind tiaras and sashes. 6 weeks away, Zola observed, reading the dates. Are you contemplating attending? MJ inquired, though his tone suggested he found the notion ludicrous. Actually, yes, I am. MJ stopped walking. Seriously, why not? We pay the same exorbitant student fees as everyone else. We possess just as much right to be there. Zola, you've been here 3 weeks. You don't comprehend what the formal is like for people like us. Last 2 years, the only black girl who got accidentally splashed with punch by Chad's girlfriend, spent the entire evening with a ruined gown. So, we don't go alone. Zola turned to face him fully. We go together. Watch each other's backs. You wish to attend the formal with me? MJ's voice cracked slightly, not as a romantic pairing, just as allies refusing to be intimidated out of an event we have every right to attend. Before MJ could respond, Chad appeared, around the corner, with Kyle and Bryce, flanking him like bodyguards. Well, what are we deliberating so intently this morning? Chad's voice carried that familiar false friendliness that made Zola's skin crawl. Nothing that concerns you, she replied. Oh, but everything concerns me. I'm student body. President, after all, must remain attuned to the pulse of student life. Chad's eyes flicked between them. You two appeared quite absorbed in conversation, planning something special. Kyle stepped closer, invading their personal space. Perhaps they're discussing the junior dance. Wouldn't that be sweet? Junior dances are for underassmen, Bryce said, with a sneer. They're probably planning something more authentic. Actually, Zola said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. We were discussing the spring formal. Chad's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. The formal, how marvelous. A true Cinderella story, assuming they can afford it. Kyle added, tickets are $250 per couple plus. Tuxedo rental dress dinner. Oh, I'm sure. They'll figure it out, Chad said, smoothly. Very resourceful, these two. Perhaps they can carpool with the custodial staff. MJ's hands clenched into fists. My family's financial standing far surpasses your own. Of course it does, Chad said in a tone you'd use with a small child. Your father's a renowned surgeon. Isn't he very impressive? I'm certain he overcame considerable obstacles to achieve his professional stature. The comment hit its mark. MJ's face flushed with anger and humiliation. Leave him alone. Zola stepped between them. I'm being supportive. I think it's splendid that MJ's family has accomplished so much, despite the obvious challenges. Chad's smile was poisonous. And I think it's wonderful that you two wish to attend the formal. Very brave. What's that supposed to mean? Nia asked. Nothing at all. Just that the formal can be overwhelming for some individuals. A great deal of tradition, a great deal of expectations. Wouldn't want anyone to feel out of place. Bryce laughed. Indeed, the elite social gathering might be a little different from what you're accustomed to. We'll manage, MJ said, quietly, but his voice shook with suppressed rage. I'm sure you will. You're both highly adaptable. Chad checked his phone. Well, we should get to class. Wouldn't want to be tardy on such a beautiful morning. As they walked away, Kyle called back, can't wait to see your formal photos. A truly historic moment for Northwood Academy. The hallway felt too confined, too bright, too saturated with staring faces. Zola could see other students, observing them, some with curiosity, others with the same cruel amusement as Chad's crew. Now, do you comprehend why? I don't wish to go, MJ asked quietly. Now I comprehend why we must go. Zola's voice was resolute. They desire us to be fearful, to conceal ourselves, to substantiate their assertion that we don't belong. So, we appear. We look spectacular. We dance and laugh and have the time of our lives. And when they attempt to humiliate us, then we handle it together. Formal night arrived with all the pomp Northwood Academy could muster. The hotel ballroom glittered with fairy lights and silver decorations, transforming the space into something that truly lived up to the Night of Starlight theme. Zola had selected a deep emerald gown that made her feel regal, while MJ looked impeccable in his rented tuxedo, his usual nervous energy replaced by quiet assurance. You clean up nicely, Jones, Zola said as they posed for photos near the entrance. You too, Hayes, ready to demonstrate our capabilities. They walked into the ballroom together, heads held high, ignoring the whispers and stares that trailed them like a wake. Several couples moved aside as they tably passed, creating an invisible bubble around them that spoke louder than any utterance. For the initial hour, things unfolded more favorably than anticipated. They danced to the slower melodies, chuckled at the abysmal DJ's attempts at humor, and even managed to relish the overpriced dinner. Chad's crew maintained their distance content, to observe from across the room with expressions that pretended future trouble. The trouble commenced when Zola stood alone by the refreshment table, awaiting MJ's return from the restroom. Chad materialized beside her like a shadow, his cologne overpowering in the warm air. Enjoying yourself, princess? His voice was silk over steel. It's been fine, thank you. Zola didn't look at him, focusing instead on ladling punch into 2 cups. You look stunning tonight. That gown truly highlights your effective 19 distinctive qualities. Zola's hand tightened on the ladle. Excuse me, I'm complimenting you. You should express gratitude. Chad stepped closer, invading her personal space. You know, if you ever tire of unfortunate situations like MJ, I could illustrate what a true Gentleman embodies, get away from me. Come on, don't be like that. I'm being amiable here. His hand moved toward her waist. Just one dance. Showcase to everyone how progressive I am, I said. No. Zola stepped back, but Chad followed, playing hard to get. I appreciate that. Very authentic. His fingers brushed her arm. I'll wager you're a wild spirit when you get going. Don't touch me, Za's voice carried across the nearby tables. Drawing, stairs. That's when MJ appeared, his face flushed with anger. She said, "Don't touch her." Chad's expression shifted to mock surprise. Easy there, hero. Merely engaging in a friendly conversation with your companion. Friendly, Chad laughed. And Kyle and Bryce materialized beside him as though they had been anticipating this moment. I was conducting myself as a gentleman. Perhaps you failed to recognize proper etiquette where you originate from. Perhaps you failed to recognize the word. Know where you originate from, MJ retorted, his voice stronger than Zola had ever heard it. The confrontation was drawing attention now. Students ceased dancing to observe their phones appearing like vultures sensing blood. Careful, Jones, Kyle said with a grin. You're exhibiting an unusual degree of bravery for someone who typically retreats. Indeed, Bryce added, cracking his wife's knuckles. Perhaps that punch is fortified. Chad held up his hands in a gesture of peace, his voice loud enough for the expanding crowd to hear. Hey, no need for threats, gentlemen. MJ is merely protecting his companion. I respect that. The apparent rationality in his tone made Zola's skin crawl. He was performing now, embodying the role of the misunderstood virtuous individual. We don't desire any trouble, Zola stated firmly. Just leave us be. Of course, no trouble whatsoever. Chad's smile was razor-sharp. You two enjoy a magnificent remainder of your evening. As they walked away, Zola heard Kyle mutter something about arrogant, and all three boys laughed. The crowd dispersed, disappointed that the drama had been concluded so swiftly. Are you all right? MJ asked, his hands trembling, slightly from adrenaline. I'm fine. You didn't have to do that. Indeed, I did. No one is permitted to touch you in such a manner. For 20 minutes, they managed to enjoy themselves again, dancing and laughing like typical teenagers at a formal, but Zola should have known Chad. He wouldn't let it go that easily. I need to use the washroom, she said during a particularly loud song. Are you fine? Here for a moment? I'll be right here when you return. The washroom was a sanctuary of sorts, quieter, cooler, with harsh fluorescent lighting that made everyone's makeup appear garish. Zola took her time, needing a moment to decompress from the tension. Meanwhile, MJ stood by their table, checking his phone and observing the other couples dance. He didn't see Chad, Kyle, and Bryce approaching until it was too late. Well, Chad said, his earlier friendly mask completely gone. Look who fancies himself a chivalrous knight. I don't want any trouble, MJ declared, but his voice lacked the conviction it had held earlier. Too bad. Trouble found. To you. Kyle grabbed MJ's arm roughly. Time for a brief discussion outside. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, you are. Bryce moved to his other side. Unless you wish to create a spectacle in front of all these respectable people. They began moving him toward a side corridor, away from the main crowd and the chaperones. MJ looked around desperately for assistance, but everyone was either dancing or deliberately looking away. Where are we going? He asked, panic creeping into his voice. Just somewhere quiet where we can have a proper dialogue, Chad said smoothly. They pushed him through a service door into a narrow hallway used by hotel staff. The music became muffled, and the sudden dimness made MJ blink. Now we can converse properly, Chad said, loosening his tie. About what? MJ backed against the wall. About difference, about limits, about the fact that you think You can embarrass me in front of the entire school. Kyle stepped closer. No, one makes Chad appear foolish. No one. You made me look like a bigot in front of everyone, Chad continued. Like I was some kind of aggressor bothering your precious companion. You were bothering her. I was being amiable, and you transformed it into something ugly. Chad's voice was ice cold now. Time you learned some ramifications. The first punch came from Kyle catching MJ in the ribs and doubling him over. Bryce followed with a hit to his shoulder, sending him stumbling against the wall. Nothing personal, Jones, Chad said, watching with detached interest. Just business. MJ tried to retaliate, throwing a wild punch that grazed Kyle's jaw. But 3 against 1 was futile, especially when he'd never been in a real fight in his life. Had enough yet? Chad asked as MJ slumped against the wall, his tuxedo torn and dirty, blood trickling from his nose. Please, MJ gasped. Just stop. When you learn your place. Bryce kicked him in the ribs. When you comprehend that heroes get injured, they left him there, straightening their clothes and returning to the ballroom as though nothing had transpired. By the time the hotel staff found MJ and alerted the chaperones, Chad and his friends were back on the dance floor, their alibis ironclad. When Zola finally found him in the hotel's first aid room, her heart shattered. MJ sat on a plastic chair, holding an ice pack to his face while Miss Jenkins filled out an incident report. What happened? Zola demanded. Mr. Jones states he sustained a fall down some stairs, Miss Jenkins said, without looking up. Probably experienced a little too much excitement for one evening. That's not what happened, MJ said quietly. Do you possess proof of place and anything else? Miss Jenkins' tone was dismissive. Any witnesses? MJ looked at Zola, and she saw the defeat in his eyes. They both knew the truth, but truth didn't matter here. Influence mattered. Wealth mattered. The correct lineage mattered. No, he whispered. No witnesses. As they left the hotel, that night, Zola felt something solidify inside her chest. The system had utterly failed them. Monday morning arrived like a blunt force trauma. Zola found MJ at his locker, a purplish bruise blooming around his left eye, despite the concealer he'd tried to use. Students walked past them with knowing smirks, and she heard whispered fragments of conversation. Whispers circulated about MJ's alleged wild behavior at the formal. Finally got what was coming to him. Should have minded his own affairs. How are you coping? Zola asked, keeping her voice low. I've been better. MJ's smile was weak. My parents wish to press charges, but apparently I can't identify my assailants in a dimly lit hallway because it was Chad, Kyle, and Bryce. Try proving that. When they were all on the dance floor, when hotel security found me. Dozens of witnesses saw them there. Zola's hands clenched into fists. This is absurd. We both know what transpired. Knowing and proving are two distinct matters. MJ closed his locker carefully. My mother is contacting Headmaster Thorne this morning for all the good it will achieve. An hour later, they sat in Headmaster Thorne's office watching him shuffle through papers with the tender enthusiasm of someone handling garbage. MJ's mother, Dr. Eleanor Jones, sat ramrod straight in her chair, her forensic psychologist training evident in every precise word. Mr. Thorne, my son was physically assaulted at a school-sponsored event. What are your intentions regarding this? Dr. Jones, I comprehend your apprehension, but, according to the incident report, MJ fell down some stairs. These occurrences transpire when young individuals become overly agitated. Dr. Jones's voice could have fractured. Crystal, he was brutally beaten. Observe his face. I perceived some contusions that are consistent with a fall. Hotel security reviewed the footage and found no evidence of an assault. Zola leaned forward. What about the corridor where it occurred? Did they inspect those cameras? Headmaster Thorne barely glanced at her. That particular passageway lacks security surveillance. Unfortunate, but not uncommon in older edifices. How convenient, Dr. Jones said icily. And I presume, Chad, Harrington's whereabouts are impeccably documented. Chad was photographed on the dance floor throughout the evening. Multiple witnesses confirm his presence. The same applies to his associates. Thorne folded his hands. Dr. Jones, I recognize your distress, but we cannot penalize students based on conjecture. This isn't conjecture, this is a pattern of harassment that your staff has disregarded for 3 years now. That is simply untrue. We treat all reports of bullying with utmost seriousness. Really? Then why is my son's locker vandalized weekly? Why do instructors ignore discriminatory remarks in their classrooms? Why does nothing ever happen to the students responsible? Thorne's expression hardened. Perhaps if MJ were more approachable, he'd experience fewer social difficulties. Sometimes students invite these problems upon themselves. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Jones stood slowly, her composure terrifying in its control. What did you just utter? I merely implied that integration functions best when everyone exerts an effort to conform. Integration. Dr. Jones's voice was deadly quiet. This is 2029, Mr. Thorne, not 1959. Of course, poor choice of terminology. I just think you think my son deserves to be beaten because he doesn't know his place. She gathered her purse. I'll be conversing with the Oversight Committee about this exchange. Dr. Jones, there's no need for threats. That wasn't a threat. That was a solemn vow. Later that afternoon, Zola found Sola herself at Apex Martial Arts, a modest establishment she'd discovered a few miles from school. The owner, Coach Eva, was a former MMA fighter who'd taken one look at her form and agreed to let her train there after the move from Phoenix. She was striking the heavy bag with more fury than precision when Eva stepped in. Easy, kid. That bag didn't inflict any harm upon you. Sorry, Coach. Zola pulled off her gloves, breathing heavily. Just had an awful day. Wished to discuss it. She recounted everything to her. The harassment, the formal incident, Headmaster Thorne's repulsive reaction. Eva listened without interruption, her scarred face growing darker with each detail. These ruffians believe they can escape accountability. As for anything, she said finally. What does your young man intend to do, MJ? Nothing. He claims retaliating merely exacerbates the situation. Sometimes worse is preferable to nothing. Do you comprehend? Zola met her eyes. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, perhaps, your friend needs to acquire the ability to safeguard himself, and perhaps you need to instruct him. You wish me to train MJ. I wish you to furnish him with alternatives. Currently, all he can do is endure it. But if he knew how to resist, I shrugged. Bullies respect fortitude, nothing else. The school would expel us if we fought back. Only if they apprehend you, and only if they care enough to take action. Eva's smile was grim. Sounds like they don't care much about anything except safeguarding their favored offspring. That evening, Zola called MJ with a proposal that would alter everything. Self-defense. Lessons. MJ's voice was skeptical. Zola, I can barely execute a single push-up. Eva states she can work with anyone. You don't have to transform into Bruce Lee overnight. Just learn enough to protect yourself. And when Chad and his friends ambush me again, 3 against 1, martial arts skills won't matter. Then we ensure it's not 3 against 1. What do you mean? Zola took a deep breath. I mean, we cease adhering to their regulations. They desire to terrorize us. Fine. Let's observe how they enjoy being intimidated for once. You're speaking of vengeance. I'm speaking of equity. The school won't shield us. The adults are indifferent, so we protect ourselves. There was a prolonged pause on the other end of the sigh line. When MJ spoke again, his voice was different, firmer, more resolute. When do we commence? Tomorrow after school. Apex Martial Arts. And MJ, yeah, bring comfortable attire. We have work to do. As Zola hung up the phone, she felt something shift inside her chest. They'd attempted to abide by the rules, tried to be the ideal victims who deserved assistance, but ideal victims merely suffered repeatedly. Time to cease being victims. 3 weeks into training, MJ's transformation was subtle, yet undeniable. His shoulders had broadened slightly, his posture was straighter, and the constant nervous energy that used to emanate from him had been supplanted by something steadier, more focused. Maintain your guard, Zola called as he worked the heavy bag at Apex Martial Arts. Chad isn't going to politely wait for you to prepare. MJ threw a combination jab, cross-hook that would have been unthinkable a month ago. His form wasn't flawless, but it was solid, determined. Coach Eva nodded approvingly. You're beginning to move, like a combatant instead of a casualty. I don't feel like a combatant yet, MJ panted, pulling off his gloves. Fighting isn't about feeling, kid. It's about executing what is necessary when the moment arrives. While MJ caught his breath, Zola reviewed the evidence they'd been accumulating. Her phone contained a dozen videos of Chad's crew harassing other students, audio, recordings of discriminatory comments in hallways, and photos of vandalized lockers. The pattern was unequivocal, systematic, and damning. Observe this, she said, showing MJ a video from that morning. Chad and Kyle cornering Samuel Evans by the gymnasium. Same strategy, every time. On screen, the two seniors had the sophomore pressed against the wall while other students walked past, deliberately ignoring what was happening. Perhaps you should stick to sports you're actually proficient at. Chad's voice came through clearly, like fleeing. We need to exhibit this to someone, MJ said, but his voice lacked conviction. Who, Headmaster Thorne? He already made it clear he's indifferent. Zola scrolled through more footage. The instructor's feign obliviousness. The oversight committee won't meet with parents. We're meticulously documenting everything, but no one in authority wishes to observe. Ava watched them from across the gym, her expression thoughtful. You know what your impediment is. You're still perceiving yourselves as victims, still awaiting someone else to rescue you. We're gathering evidence, Zola protested. Evidence for what? A legal proceeding that will never materialize. A system that has already demonstrated its indifference. Ava shook her head. Sometimes justice must be seized, not bestowed. Meanwhile, in the Northwood Academy parking lot, Chad leaned against his luxury SUV, scrolling through social media, with Kyle and Bryce flanking him like bodyguards. Check this out, Kyle said, showing Chad his phone. Someone posted a video of Jones and Hayes walking to the parking lot together. Look at the comments. Chad read them with growing amusement. Dynamic duo. Trailblazers. Watch out, Chad. The last one made him laugh out loud. People are starting to take notice of them. Bryce observed as if they believe they're some sort of champions or something. Champions. Chad's voice dripped with disdain. Jones is still the same pitiful tech nerd he's always been, and Hayes is merely infuriated because she fails to comprehend the established order here. Speaking of which, Kyle pointed across the parking lot. Isn't that intriguing? Chad followed his gaze to see Zola and MJ getting into Zola's car, both carrying gym bags. They looked different, more self-assured, less apprehensive. Where do you suppose they're headed? Bryce asked. Probably some community center learning, interpretive dance or something. Chad's joke fell flat even to him. There was something about the way they carried themselves now that disturbed him. It's irrelevant. Let them play at being warriors. Reality has a way of reasserting itself. But as he watched them drive away, Chad felt the first stirring of something he hadn't experienced in years. Doubt. Back at Apex Martial Arts, Zola was demonstrating to MJ how to record with his phone without being obvious. The key is to appear natural. Pretend you're texting or checking social media. She demonstrated holding her phone casually while the camera captured everything. They're so accustomed to being untouchable, they don't even attempt to conceal their actions anymore. What's the ultimate objective here? MJ asked. We can't disseminate this material online without facing expulsion. Perhaps expulsion is justifiable if we expose the true nature of this institution. Easy for you to assert. You've been here 2 months. I have 3 years of flawless academic records, contingent on remaining unblemished. Zola studied his face, discerning the conflict there. You're fearful, terrified, MJ admitted, but I'm more weary than fearful. Weary of being afraid, weary of hiding, weary of pretending this is normal. Then we take action. Like what? Before Zola could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was concise and chilling. We know where you train. She showed it to MJ, whose face went pale. How did they acquire your number? It's irrelevant. Zola's voice, it was steady, but her hands were shaking slightly. What matters is their grave, observing us now. Ava appeared beside them, having noticed their expressions. Problem. Zola showed her the text. Her face darkened. Ruffians attempting to intimidate you outside school now. She pondered for a moment. Perhaps it's time to accelerate your training regimen. What do you mean? I mean, perhaps awaiting them to make the next move isn't the intelligent strategy. Perhaps it's time to seize control of when and where this concludes. MJ looked between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're speaking of confronting them. I'm speaking of concluding what they initiated, Eva said, on your terms, not theirs. As they left the gym that evening, Zola felt the weight of the decision awaiting them. They could continue documenting, continue hoping someone in authority would care, continue being victims, or they could choose an entirely different course. The text on her phone felt like a line being drawn in the sand. Chad and his crew had just committed their most significant error. They'd conveyed they were sufficiently fearful to escalate. And fearful bullies, Zola had learned, were dangerous bullies, but they were also desperate ones. The plan was simple, in theory, devastating in practice. Zola and MJ would create scenarios where Chad's crew would reveal their true colors on camera, constructing an undeniable case of harassment that even Headmaster Thorne couldn't disregard. Are you certain about this? MJ asked, adjusting the small camera concealed in his backpack. The device borrowed from his dad's engineering firm was nearly invisible, but captured everything in high definition. We require proof, Zola said, checking her own recording, set up on her phone. Tangible evidence that cannot be dismissed or rationalized. Away. They'd spent the morning planning their approach. MJ would position himself near Chad's locker, appearing vulnerable and solitary. Zola would stay close enough to intervene if things progressed too far, but far enough away to maintain the illusion that MJ was isolated. Remember, just act natural, Zola coached. Allow them to do what they always do. We're simply going to finally capture it on record. The first opportunity arose during lunch. MJ walked past Chad's table in the dining hall, making eye contact just long enough to be noticed. The response was immediate. Well, look who's feeling audacious today, Chad called out loud, if enough for nearby tables to hear. How's it, that black eye recuperating? Jones? MJ stopped his body language carefully, crafted to appear nervous but not Retreating. It's fine. I'll wager it is. Heard you've been engaging in physical fitness recently. Is that accurate? Perhaps. Kyle and Bryce flanked Chad as he stood up, creating the familiar triangle formation they're used to. Intimidate. Other students began pulling. He's like Seaver's clay, out phones, sensing drama. Perhaps. Chad laughed. Come on, MJ, we're all associates here. Inform us about this new exercise regimen. There's nothing to us. Disclose. Certainly. There is. Word circulates that you and your companion who have been spending a great deal of time at some athletic facility. Very inspiring, very authentic. The racial undertone was subtle but unmistakable. Several white students nodded approvingly, while others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. We're merely working out, MJ said, his voice steadier than Zola had expected. Of course, you must maintain combat readiness, right? Chad stepped closer. One never knows when one might need to safeguard oneself. The threat was implicit but clear. MJ's camera was capturing every utterance, every expression, every witness who observed, silently. I don't desire any trouble, MJ said. No one desires trouble, but sometimes trouble finds you regardless. Chad's smile was cold, especially when you disregard your proper position. That's when Bryce noticed something that sent a chill down his spine. Chad, he whispered urgently. Examine his backpack. Chad's eyes narrowed as he spotted the tiny lens barely visible through the fabric. His expression shifted from casual cruelty to genuine fury. You little viper, he hissed. You're recording this. The dining hall fell dead silent. Even students had practically. Distant tables ceased eating to watch. I don't know what you're referring to, MJ said, but his voice betrayed him. Don't lie to me. Chad grabbed MJ's backpack, yanking it open to reveal the hidden camera. You've been entrapping us. The realization struck the room like a bomb. Students began murmuring, some approving of MJ's tactics, others viewing it as a betrayal of unwritten social protocols. How long? Kyle demanded. How long have you been clandestinely observing us? We weren't clandestinely observing, MJ said, his voice growing stronger. We were documenting harassment. Harassment? Chad's laugh was harsh. We were merely conversing with you. You were threatening me again. I was being amiable, and you transformed it into some kind of scheme. Chad's face was flushed with genuine anger. Now you made us look like delinquents. You are delinquent, Zola said, appearing beside MJ. The phone was also out, openly recording. Now, get that device away from me. Bryce snarled, reaching for her phone. Don't touch me, Zola warned. But Bryce was beyond listening. He lunged for her phone, and that's when everything veered. Off course. Zola's martial arts training activated automatically. She sidestepped his grasp, and her fist connected with his solar plexus, dropping him to his knees. The dining hall erupted. Students leaped onto tables for improved vantage points. Phones appeared everywhere, and pandemonium spread like wildfire. You wish to engage in combat? Chad screamed, his composure completely shattered. Fine, let's fight. He swung at MJ, who managed to duck thanks to weeks of training. Kyle joined the fray, and suddenly it was a full brawl in front of 200 witnesses. Instructors rushed in, shouting orders that no one heard over the den. Within minutes, security had separated the combatants, but the damage was done. My office, all of you, Headmaster Thorne bellowed. Now as they were escorted out of the dining hall, Zola caught glimpses of student phones capturing everything. The video would be online within minutes, propagating across social media like wildfire. But she also discerned something else in Chad's eyes that chilled her cold, calculating fury. This wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. You presume yourself so intelligent, Chad whispered as they walked down the hallway. You possess no a comprehension of what you have just initiated. Zola met his gaze steadily. Neither do you. The truth was none of might. Them understood what forces they just unleashed. The delicate equilibrium of power at Northwood Academy had been shattered, and what would emerge from the chaos was anyone's guess. But there was no turning back now. The suspension lasted 3 days for everyone involved. But the true retribution was just commencing. Zola sat in her family's living room watching the dining hall altercation video accumulate thousands of views on social media. The comment section was a battlefield of its own. Black girl thinks she's tough. About time someone confronted Chad Harrington. Typical inner city behavior. Those bullies received their just desserts. Her mother, Alicia Hayes, paced behind the couch with the controlled fury of someone who'd spent years fighting similar battles. I'm proud of you for defending yourself, she said finally, but recording them like that was perilous, darling. You cornered them. They cornered themselves by being discriminatory bullies. That's not how they perceive it, and that's not how their parents will perceive it either. Zola's phone buzzed with a text from MJ. My parents are incensed. Not at me, at the school. Dad's consulting a legal representative. Before she could respond, another message appeared from an unknown number. You made a grave error. This isn't over. Her blood ran cold. She showed the text to her mother, who immediately called the police. But when the officer arrived 2 hours later, his response was predictably dismissive. Could be from anyone. Probably just some kid letting off steam. Nothing we can truly do, unless there's a specific threat. What do you classify this isn't over as? Alicia demanded. I classify it as teenagers being melodramatic. Look, your daughter instigated a fight at school. Perhaps maintain a low profile, thinking for a while, instead of seeking more trouble. Meanwhile, across town, Chad sat in his family's pristine living room, confronting the wrath of his father, tech mogul Richard Harrington. The man's corporate aspirations had just suffered a serious setback thanks to his son's viral humiliation. Do you possess any notion of what you've done? His father raged. I'm negotiating a major acquisition, and my son is all over the dime. Internet appearing like a common ruffian. Dad, they entrapped us. They were illegally recording us. I don't care if they had a full production crew. You never ever furnish them with ammunition to utilize against you. Richard's face was red with fury. The minority community is already demanding my censure, claiming I raised a bigoted son. The Coalition for Equity is maybe threatening protests. I'm not bigoted. Inform that to the 15 million people who witnessed you threaten that boy on camera. Chad's mother, Valerie, sat silently in her designer chair, her public relations consultant instincts calculating damage control. We need to preempt this narrative, she said. Finally, show Chad engaged in philanthropic endeavors. Perhaps volunteer work with underserved youth. I'm not performing charitable acts with those people, Chad snapped, his father's hand connected with his cheek in a sharp slap. You'll execute precisely what we instruct you to do, or you'll find yourself at a reformatory academy quicker than you can blink. The room fell silent. Chad's cheek burned, but his eyes burned hotter with humiliation and rage. However, his father continued, his voice dropping to a perilous whisper. That doesn't signify we permit this to slide. There are methods to address problems such as this. Discreet methods. Chad met his father's eyes and saw something that chilled him. Not anger, but cold calculation. This was how the Harrington family had maintained influence for generations, not through open confrontation, but through systematic dismantling of their adversaries. What do you wish me to do? Nothing. Allow us to handle it. Back at Northwood Academy, the aftermath of the dining hall incident rippled through the student body like shock waves. Zola returned to school to find herself transformed into something she'd never desired to be: a symbol. Zola. A group of Younger black students surrounded her at TAVR, her locker. That was so epic how you flattened Bryce. Can you teach us how to fight? I don't wish to teach anyone to fight, she said, uncomfortable with the attention. But you demonstrated to them. They can't simply push us around anymore. One of the sophomores stated, you advocated for all of us. The weight of their expectations pressed down on her like a physical force. She merely wished to protect herself and MJ. But somehow she'd become the embodiment of resistance against the school's toxic environment. MJ appeared beside her, looking equally overwhelmed. The guidance counselor wishes to see us, he said quietly. Miss Jenkins's office felt like a snare. The woman sat behind her desk with a false smile that didn't reach her eyes. I've been reviewing this incident, she began. While I comprehend you felt provoked, your actions were entirely inappropriate. They were harassing us, Zola said, according to whom the video depicts Chad engaged in a normal conversation before. You two escalated to violence. Normal. MJ's voice cracked with disbelief. He threatened me. I perceive friendly discourse that became unruly when you decided to engineer drama. Miss Jenkins' tone was dismissive. The recording device demonstrates premeditation. You orchestrated this confrontation. We plan to document harassment. You plan to embarrass fellow students and create a viral sensation for social media recognition. She leaned forward. I'm recommending both of you for transfer to a specialized alternative program. Clearly, you're not a suitable fit for Northwood Academy's culture. The threat hung in the air like poison. Alternative education meant relinquishing their academic futures, their university prospects, their aspirations. You cannot do that, Zolola whispered. Excuse me, I said. No, we're not apologizing for defending ourselves. Miss Jenkins' smile disappeared entirely. Then you'll face the repercussions, both of you. As they left the office, Zola realized they'd crossed a point of no return. The system hadn't just failed them, it was actively working against them. War had been declared, and they were on their own. Chad paced the empty parking lot behind the gymnasium like a caged animal, his expensive sneakers scuffing against the asphalt. Kyle and Bryce flanked him, both looking uncomfortable with the rage radiating from their leader. I can't endure it any longer, Chad snarled. Everyone's staring at me as if I'm some kind of jest. Me? Do you comprehend what my family name signifies in this municipality? Dude, maybe we should just relinquish it, Kyle said nervously. The whole situation has dissipated. People are already discussing other matters. Dissipated? Chad's voice cracked with fury. My father won't even look at me. My mother's been receiving calls from journalists all week, and you desire me to relinquish it. Bryce shifted uncomfortably. Your dad advised, lying low. Remember, let them handle it. My dad doesn't grasp what it's like to traverse these halls, knowing everyone's witnessed you get humiliated by some low-income transfer student. Chad's fists clenched at his sides. Isaac painstakingly built my reputation over 4 years, and they obliterated it in 30 seconds. So, what do you wish to do? Kyle asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I wish to remind them why they should have remained in their designated place. I wish them to comprehend that actions yield consequences. Chad's eyes gleamed with malicious intent, and I wish everyone to witness it transpire. Chad, man, if we get caught, we won't get caught. There are no cameras back here, no witnesses, just us and them, engaging in a brief discussion about respect. What Chad didn't know was that his father had spent the past 3 days pulling strings. Behind the scenes, tech mogul Richard Harrington had made strategic phone calls to the Oversight Committee, applied pressure in clandestine meetings, and leveraged corporate favors amassed over decades of business. It was textbook damage control. Make the problem vanish through institutional power rather than messy public confrontations. The Harrington family had been playing this game for generations, but Chad, in his privileged bubble of rage and humiliation, had no idea his father was already resolving everything through proper channels. "There they are," Bryce whispered, pointing across the lot. Zola and MJ walked toward her car, their conversation focused on their plans to meet Coach Eva. They looked relaxed, confident, everything Chad used to be before they came along. Perfect. Chad breathed nicely, isolated. "Chad, seriously, perhaps we should reconsider this." Kyle tried one last time. "What if they resist?" Chad laughed bitterly. "Jones, please. And Hayes is merely one girl. What's she going to accomplish? Against three of us?" The three boys emerged from behind the maintenance shed, their movements coordinated like a pack of predators. Chad felt a familiar rush of power that came from having backup, from being the one with the advantage. "Going somewhere. Exclusive," he called out, his voice dripping with false friendliness. Zola and MJ turned, and Chad saw something in their expressions that he didn't recognize. Not fear, but something else. Something that should have warned him to reconsider. "We don't desire any trouble," MJ said, but his stance was different somehow. More balanced, more prepared. "Too late for that," Kyle snarled, feeding off Chad's energy. "You already caused us sufficient trouble." Chad stepped forward, feeling the familiar thrill of intimidation. "Do you comprehend what you've done to my Bitnit family? My father's reputation is in jeopardy because of your little spectacle." "Good," Zola said flatly, her voice carrying no trace of the submission Chad expected. "Perhaps he'll learn not to raise prejudiced offspring." The word hit Chad like a physical blow. "Prejudiced? I'm not prejudiced. I merely understand my position in the world, and I understand yours. The problem is you forgot yours." "Which is what exactly?" Zola stepped forward, her hands hanging loose at her sides in a deceptively casual stance. "Beneath us," Chad said, with all the venom he could muster. "Always has been, always will be. Is that accurate?" MJ's voice was steady, stronger than Chad had ever heard it. "That's precisely accurate, and it's time you both recalled that lesson." Chad nodded to his friends, and they began to spread out, forming a triangle around Zola and MJ. It was a formation they'd used countless times before. Surround the victim. Eliminate escape routes. Apply overwhelming pressure until resistance crumbled. "Last opportunity to withdraw," Zola said quietly. Chad's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Withdraw from you two? I think not." He raised his fist. The signal his crew had been awaiting. The confrontation was about to commence. The first punch came from Kyle, aimed at MJ's head with all the fury of 3 years of accumulated dominance. But MJ wasn't the same terrified kid who used to cower in hallways. He ducked under the swing and drove his fist into Kyle's, the tip in it. The different bite of the swing, ribs. The impact making a satisfying thud. Kyle staggered back, eyes wide, with shock. "What the—" Before he could finish, MJ followed up with a left hook that caught Kyle in the jaw, snapping his head to the side. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth as he stumbled against a car. Meanwhile, Chad and Bryce circled Zola like wolves, their confidence shaken but not broken by MJ's unexpected confidence. 2 against 1, Zola taunted, bouncing lightly on her feet. "Still not fair. Odds for us," Chad snarled, lunging forward. Zola sidestepped his wild swing. He countered with a sharp jab to his solar plexus that doubled him over. But Bryce was already moving, catching her with a glancing blow to the shoulder that spun her around. "Got you now." Bryce grinned, pressing his advantage. He threw a haymaker that would have tonight ended the fight, but Zola rolled with the punch, absorbing most of the impact on her forearm. Her return uppercut caught Bryce under the chin, lifting him off his feet for a moment before he crashed back down. Across the lot, Kyle had recovered enough to charge at MJ again, this time leading with his shoulder like a linebacker. The tackle drove MJ back against the gymnasium wall, knocking the wind out of him. "Not so tough now, are you?" Kyle gasped, blood still flowing from his split lip. He grabbed MJ by the shirt and drove a pixie knee toward his midsection. But MJ twisted away at the last second. The knee hit brick instead of flesh, and Kyle howled in pain. MJ's elbow strike caught Kyle in the temple, stunning him, long enough for MJ to break free. But the effort left him exposed, and Kyle's desperate backhand caught him across the cheek, sending his glasses flying. "MJ," Zola called out, momentarily distracted. Chad seized the opportunity, tackling to her around the waist and driving her to constituent, the asphalt. They rolled across the ground, each fighting for position until Chad ended up on top. Finally, he did not, panted, raising his fist. "Time to put you in your place." But Zola's legs were free, and her knees shot up between Chad's legs with devastating accuracy. He rolled off her, clutching himself and making sounds that weren't quite human. Bryce tried to capitalize on Zola's position on the ground, but she swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing down beside her. They both scrambled to their feet, breathing hard, circling each other like prize fighters. "You're stronger than I anticipated," Bryce admitted, wiping blood from his nose. "You're weaker," Zola replied, then launched a combination that drove him backward. Her left hook connected with his ribs, her right cross caught him in the jaw, and her follow-up left sent him stumbling into a parked car. But Bryce wasn't finished. He grabbed a handful of gravel from the ground and flung it at her eyes. Zola threw up her hands to protect her face, and Bryce's tackle drove her back against Chad's luxury SUV. The impact knocked the breath out of her, and Bryce's fist caught her in the stomach, doubling her over. Meanwhile, MJ and Kyle were locked in a desperate grapple near the maintenance shed. Both boys were bloodied and exhausted, their technique deteriorating into raw desperation. Kyle managed to, get behind MJ, wrapping his arm around and his throat in a chokehold. "Give up," he gasped. "Just give up." But weeks of training had built more than just muscle. They'd built determination. MJ drove his elbow back into Kyle's ribs, repeatedly until the grip loosened. Then spun around and caught Kyle with a right cross that dropped him to his knees. "I'm done giving up," MJ said, standing over his defeated tormentor. Across the lot, Zola had recovered from Bryce's dirty tactics and was systematically dismantling his offense. Every punch he threw, she either blocked or countered. Every attempt to grapple, she escaped with fluid technique. Chad, still recovering from her knee strike, watched in growing horror as his crew, his symbols of power and dominance, were being beaten by the two students he'd spent months terrorizing. "This is impossible," he wheezed, struggling to his feet. "We're supposed to win. We always win." "Not today," Zola said, advancing on him with controlled fury. That's when the voice cut through the whirled parking lot like a whip crack. "What in the blazes is going on here?" Everyone froze. Coach Ava stood at the edge of the lot, her weathered face dark with anger. Behind her, attracted by the noise, were several other adults, including a security guard. "Everyone, step back now," Ava commanded, pulling out her phone. "I'm contacting the authorities." As sirens wailed in the bland distance, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The fight was over, but the real battle was just beginning. The police arrived with sirens blaring and lights flashing, transforming the quiet parking lot into a crime scene. Officer Ramirez stepped out of the first patrol car, taking in the scene. 3 white boys bloodied and beaten, 2 black students standing, defiantly despite their own injuries. "Everybody stay where you are," he commanded, his hand resting on his weapon. Chad struggled to his feet, his pristine appearance ruined. "Officer, thank heavens you're here. These 2 assaulted us. We were merely walking to our cars when they ambushed us." "That's not what transpired," Zola said firmly, wiping blood from her split lip. "Are you seriously going to believe them over us?" Kyle added, still clutching his ribs. "Look at us. We're the aggrieved parties here." Officer Ramirez's expression remained neutral, but Zola could see the familiar pattern forming. 3 white boys from prominent families against 2 black students. She'd witnessed this narrative before. Actually, Coach Eva stepped forward, holding up her phone. "I've recorded the entire incident." The parking lot fell, silent except for the crackling of police radios. "I was in my office, upstairs, when I overheard shouting." Eva, and continued, "started recording when I observed them cornering these 2 young people. Captured everything from the threats to the initial punch." Chad's face went white. That's impossible. "Modern phones possess excellent zoom capabilities," Eva said, with grim satisfaction. "Wish to view it." She held up her phone, and even from a distance, the audio was crystal clear. Chad's voice saying, "Beneath us, always, has been, always will be," followed by Kyle throwing the first punch. Officer Ramirez examined the phone, his expression growing darker with each succeeding second of footage. "Well, this alters the circumstances. You can't utilize that," Bryce protested. "He didn't have authorization to record us." "Actually, I can," Eva said. "Public space, no. Expectation of privacy. Basic legal principle." Within minutes, backup units arrived, followed by paramedics and Detective Sandra Thompson, a no-nonsense, a woman who'd been investigating hate crimes for 15 years. "Allow me to clarify," Detective Thompson said. "After reviewing the footage, you 3 approached these 2 students, uttered racially charged statements, threatened with them, and initiated the physical altercations. We were merely conversing." Chad insisted, his privileged confidence fracturing. "They escalated it." "Son, I possess video evidence that contradicts your statement." Thompson turned to Zola. "And MJ, you 2 require medical attention." "We're fine," Zola said, though her knuckles were split and bleeding. "You're not fine. You defended yourselves against 3 assailants." Thompson's voice carried a note of respect. "That demands bravery." The paramedics checked everyone for serious injuries, while Detective Thompson took statements. Chad kept insisting his father would resolve this, but his threats rang hollow. "Now, your father's a prominent tech mogul, right?" Thompson asked with dangerous calm. "Good. Then he'll comprehend the importance of prosecuting hate crimes to the fullest extent of the law." Across the lot, more people were arriving. Parents, school, officials, and media representatives, drawn by police scanners and social media posts. Someone had already uploaded Eva's video, and it was spreading like wildfire. Dr. Eleanor Jones arrived first, her forensic psychologist instincts immediately taking over. "MJ, do not utter anything further without my presence," she commanded, then turned to Detective Thompson. "I demand these 3 be arrested for aggravated assault and hate crimes." "Already progressing on that," Thompson replied. Chad's parents arrived, in a black limousine, his father's corporate composure cracking when he saw his son in handcuffs. "This is preposterous." Richard Harrington stormed over to Thompson. "My son is the victim here. Your son is under arrest for aggravated assault and intimidation," Thompson said calmly. "I possess video evidence of him making racial threats before initiating violence. I'll have your badge for this. Feel free to attempt. The video has already gone viral. It might be challenging to manipulate this one." Richard's face went ashen as he realized the corporate implications. His son's prejudiced attack, captured in high definition and spreading across the internet, had just destroyed his public image. Meanwhile, Headmaster Thorne arrived looking as if he'd ingested poison. The altercation, the arrest, the viral video, everything he'd attempted to conceal was now exploding in his face. This could have been managed internally, he said to Detective Thompson. Really, like you managed this formal incident or the 3 years of harassment these kids documented? Thompson held up a file. Indeed, we are aware of all that. It turns out, when young people start getting beaten up, parents start speaking. More patrol cars arrived, along with news vans and reporters. The story was expanding by the minute. Tech mogul's son arrested for prejudiced attack. Viral video exposes school bullying. Students fight back against harassment. Zola watched Chad being loaded into a patrol car, his designer clothes torn and dirty, his face a mask of defeat and disbelief. For 3 years, he'd terrorized students with impunity. Now, in the span of an hour, his entire world had collapsed. "How do you feel?" a reporter asked, shoving a microphone in Zola's face. "As though justice is finally being served," she said simply. Kyle and Bryce were arrested next to their parents arriving, to find their sons facing serious charges. The video rendered their guilt undeniable. 3 privileged bullies attacking 2 students who'd done nothing but defend themselves. As the police cars pulled away, carrying Chad's crew to detention, Zola felt something and she hadn't experienced since arriving at Northwood Academy. Hope. Coach Eva put her hand on Zola's shoulder. "You did well, kid, both of you. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the most formidable battle of all." Dr. Eleanor Jones approached them, her eyes bright with fierce pride. "The district attorney's office will have to recuse themselves from this case due to conflict of interest. The state attorney general's office will be assuming prosecution." "What does that imply?" MJ asked. "It implies they're going to juvenile detention," his mother said with satisfaction. "And this school is going to face a federal civil rights investigation." As the sun set over Northwood Academy, Zola realized that their fight in the parking lot had been about more than just self-defense. It had been about dignity, equity, and the right to exist without apprehension. And, for the first time since she'd arrived, she truly believed they'd triumphed. A few months later, Zola stood in the same parking lot where everything had changed. But the space felt different, now, safer. The maintenance shed where Chad's crew used to plot their attacks had been repurposed into a student mindfulness garden, complete with benches and motivational quotes about resilience and fairness. The transformation at Northwood Academy had been swift and comprehensive. Headmaster Thorne was gone, replaced by Dr. Lena Walker, a former civil rights lawyer who'd made her first priority addressing the school's toxic culture. 3 instructors had been dismissed for disregarding harassment. New policies mandated immediate reporting of any discriminatory behavior. Chad, Kyle, and Bryce were serving 1 year in juvenile detention for aggravated assault and hate crimes. Their expulsion had been permanent, their university prospects destroyed, along with their families' reputations. Richard Harrington had resigned in disgrace, his corporate career over before it truly began. "Strange how quiet it is now," MJ said, appearing beside her. His confidence had grown dramatically over the past months. Shoulders back, head high. No more nervous glances over his shoulder. "Good, quiet, or bad quiet?" Zola asked. "Definitely good. Did you hear about the settlement?" The civil rights lawsuit had resulted in a $3 million judgment against the school district. Half would go to establishing an anti-bullying initiative. The other half split between the victims of harassment. It wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. Mom says we should utilize our share for higher education. Zola said MIT is costly. MIT. MJ's eyes lit up. You gained admission full. Scholarship engineering program. She bumped his shoulder playfully. What? About you still contemplating Harvard? Med? Actually, I'm considering altering my major to what? Civil rights law. Turns out I enjoy contending for equity. He smiled and she saw none of the fear that used to define him. Wished to transform the system from within. They walked toward the main building, passing groups of students who nodded, respectfully rather than staring with hostility. The viral video of their confrontation had made them celebrities, of sorts, but more importantly, it had made them symbols of resistance against injustice. Do you ever regret it? MJ asked as they climbed the front steps, fighting back. I mean everything that ensued. Zola considered the question. Seriously, the past months had been intense media interviews, court appearances, congressional testimony about prejudice in educational institutions. It would have been simpler to remain silent, to accept the harassment as the cost of existing in predominantly white spaces. No, she said. Finally, I regret that it took so long. I regret all the young people who suffered before we found our courage. We inspired them, though. Look around. He was correct. The hallways buzzed with an energy that felt fundamentally different. Students of color walked with their heads held high. The few remaining bullies kept their biases to themselves, knowing there would be tangible repercussions. The school newspaper had initiated an anti-discrimination column, penned by former victims who were finally discovering their voices. Remember when we thought graduation would never arrive? MJ said as they reached his locker. Now, it's only 2 months away. Zola leaned against the wall. Do you think you'll miss this place? Parts of it, the positive aspects, we helped forge. He meticulously organized his books, a habit that had never changed despite everything else about him that had. What about you? Prepared to leave all this behind? Ready for the next chapter always? But I won't forget this one. They'd been invited to speak at conferences to share their narrative with other schools confronting similar problems. The requests came in weekly from administrators, student groups, even congressional committees studying educational policy. Their experience had become a case study in how systemic transformation could emerge from individual fortitude. Maya asked if we wished to socialize this weekend. MJ mentioned casually, study group for advanced history. Sounds agreeable. I could use assistance with the SEFT Reconstruction Era section. Ironic, considering we just fought our own. Zola laughed and the sound echoed down the hallway that had once felt like enemy territory. Do you believe we prevailed? Look around. What do you surmise? She did look around at students, walking freely without apprehension, at subscribed instructors who actually intervened when they observed issues at a school that had been compelled to confront its failings and evolve from them. Yes, she said, I believe we prevailed. As they walked to their first class together, Zola felt the comfortable rhythm of their friendship, tested by fire, strengthened by struggle, pointing toward an uncertain but hopeful future. Whatever came next for them, individually or together, remained unwritten, full of possibility. Some narratives concluded with clear resolutions. Others ended with new beginnings. This felt like both. In the hallway behind them, a freshman who'd been watching nervously straightened his shoulders and walked a little taller. The cycle of courage, it seemed, was just beginning. I trust you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have personally selected 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt Empathy.